One of your books is called Suppose You Were an Idiot, Mark Twain on Politics and Politicians.
Indeed, yeah. And the logic behind that was, again, this is an example of you don't need to create the humor. Mark Twain has a lot of very humorous lines. But Twain once said, suppose you were an idiot, suppose you were a congressman, but I repeat myself. Okay? And of course, that of course is not at all relevant to anything that's happening here in the United States today. Thankfully.
I love it.
What are you laughing at? I'm shocked and stunned that you would think it was appropriate for today.
We've curated a vast network of business experts ready to address your company's most pressing challenges. From corporate growth strategy to leadership, marketing strategy, sales strategy, branding, customer relations, technology, AI, IT security, and beyond. We connect you to the best experts for your needs. Reach out to us for more information or schedule a call at grownlearn.org to explore how we can support you. We're going to be speaking today about humor, about success in business and humor, how this relates. My guest is an Irishman who lives somewhere where there's a lot of grass-fed beef and he enjoys it very much. Or was it corn-fed beef and a lot of Guinness? He lives in Chicago. I'm welcoming Conor Cunneen, otherwise known as Irishman Speaks. He's a former VP of marketing and he's awarded twice by a president he's going to tell us what for. Hi, Conor.
Hi, Zarina. Good to be talking with you.
Awesome talking to you. I'm up for a laugh today.
Let's go for it. Laughter is really important. It makes a difference to how people react to the world and react to people.
Yeah, I want to know more about it. I know you talk about neuroscience as well, which is something that I'm also interested in, and I have courses related to neuroscience. So I'm quite curious on the relationship between laughter and neuroscience. But before we begin, what were the awards for? Because this is what I didn't finish. The presidential awards.
Yeah, I got an award from President Obama. It was the President's Gold Medal for Volunteer Service for the work that I do with the unemployed. I earned a crust primarily as a keynote speaker, speaking to associations and corporations to improve people, performance and productivity with a smile, but helping people who are unemployed. Although I rarely use that word, I talk about being in job search because it's a different mindset. Helping people who are in job search is a real passion of mine, and it's one that gives me a real emotional lift and a feeling of doing something worthwhile. So I received an award from Obama, the President's Gold Medal for Volunteer Service, for the amount of work I do with people who are in job search.
Fantastic. Do you still do this kind of work right now?
Yeah, I do. It's something I've been doing for the last 20 years. I mean, I got involved with the brand Irishman Speaks. That developed about 22 years ago after I left a corporate position. I was actually working with a large multinational. They wanted me to go back to Europe. I didn't want to go back for family reasons. So, as I say, I told them to get stuffed. They told me get stuffed, so we had a mutual stuffing kind of thing. And as a result of that, I actually was working. I just saw what it was like to be unemployed, although I didn't really consider myself that. And it allowed me to think through what I wanted to do. And I developed my own consulting business and speaking business and the brand Irishman Speaks. But I saw, Zarina, how difficult unemployment. This is where I use the word unemployment. If you believe you're unemployed, it's a mental thing. It really eats into you. I saw how difficult unemployment can be for some people, and I started doing some work just trying to help them on an individual basis, on a community basis, and it just kind of is something I've been doing ever since. And to be honest with you, when I hear someone who has been in job search for 5 or 6 months and they land a new position, that is something that gives me a real lift. And I get more satisfaction, quite honestly, out of the job search support work that I do than I get out of, in general, speaking to corporate groups, although there are a few corporate groups I just absolutely adore working with.
Your talks for corporations revolve around business solutions, brand strategy, business strategy, what you refer to as business bluntly and BS.
Yeah.
People, performance, productivity with a smile.
Yeah. Well, you see, one of the things, and I know you know this from your own work as well, you've got to be able to differentiate yourself a little bit, no matter what industry that you're in. And one of the ways I can differentiate myself, obviously, is having the Irish brogue. That does make me a little bit memorable. But what I also try and do, though, is I try to provide really good business sense, business solutions, business strategy. And one of the ways I do that is by dropping some humor throughout my presentation to reinforce the messaging. So sometimes when I'm speaking to potential clients or event planners, once they get to know me a little bit, I'll say, well, actually, what I promise is to leave my audience with a smile on the face, with a spring in the step, and with some memorable, actionable takeaways to improve the workplace. Or another way I put it is, it's a combination of business, blarney, and BS. Mm-hmm. And the BS can be brand strategy, business solutions, or a little bit of BS kind of thing.
People often say, well, it's easier for you to be uplifted or feel elated, feel happy because you don't have that problem. You yourself have survived cancer twice. So it's not like you've had a very easy life, let's put it this way. What keeps you, what keeps your humorous state, or where did you learn this ability? Is it inbuilt? How are you related to humor?
Right. Well, I suppose in one sense, I am lucky, Zarina, in that I do naturally have a pretty positive attitude, and I am optimistic. And that definitely does help me. But everyone goes through difficult times. One of the questions I speak about when I am talking to audiences about when you go through difficult times is that you can actually choose your attitude. And that might sound a little bit cliche and kind of motivational speaker-ish, etc. But the question I put to people is, when something goes wrong, ask yourself the question, what do I want my attitude to be? What do I want my attitude to be? Because if you ask yourself that question, you're not going to say, I want to be angry, or I want to be frustrated, I want to be disappointed. If you ask, what do I want my attitude to be? You will make some effort, I think. You'll say, I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be frustrated. And when you answer it that way, you will make some effort not to be angry, not to be frustrated. And I think it really does help you in difficult times. And the other time it helps you, Zarina, is that if you're going into a difficult meeting with someone, or you're going into difficult negotiations, I do say that human beings mirror human beings' reaction. So if I go into that difficult meeting kind of being brusque and all guns blazing, what's going to happen inside in the meeting? The other people are going to get defensive. Guns will be blazing from their side as well, kind of thing, and the meeting can be a problem. However, if before that difficult meeting, if before that difficult negotiation, you say, all right, what do I want my attitude to be going into that meeting? You're not going to say, I want to go in with all guns blazing. You're going to say, I want to go in with the right kind of attitude that will help me to achieve what I want to achieve at that meeting. And if I go in with a calm attitude, with a more appropriate attitude, that may well set the tone for the room, and it may well help to improve the conversation and the negotiation as well.
Mm-hmm. When you present...
Sorry.
No worries. When you present your presentations for corporations, and you talk about this part of your work, attitude, how to succeed based on your psychology, how do you intertwine this with business? Do you actually give specific business tools? Do you actually talk about business at all, or do you talk about kind of the soft, which is not soft? The neurology is, I've stated this many times, it's an old terminology, soft, but it's like the human aspect of success. What do you talk about?
Right. Well, I mean, talking about soft, I mean, soft skills, in my opinion, are the hardest things to get right. And soft skills, if you get them right, you will have a better organization. There's no doubt about that. You'll have better productivity, you'll have better camaraderie and better environment in which to work. So soft skills are hard to implement, but they really provide good benefits. And what I say, Zarina, is that one of the concepts I speak about is the gift of gab. And this again kind of goes back to a little bit of differentiating yourself in the Irishman speaks type of branding. So the Irish are famous for the gift of gab. And for me, in my presentations, when I speak to associations or corporations or healthcare groups, I say gab is about goals, attitude, and behavior. Goals, attitude, and behavior. And every single person and every single organization should have something important to say and relate in relation to goals, in relation to their attitude, and in relation to their behavior. So what I try to do is I try to bring those elements in, and then I subdivide them into different areas about goals, attitude, and behavior, dropping in humorous stories when I'm doing it to reinforce the messaging. But the basic idea is to provide good content that people remember when they leave. And the way to do that, in my opinion, is to make sure you've got well-researched content, it's solid, and it stands up to rigorous research or commentary, that it can be told through good storytelling a lot of the time, and also through humor. Take those three elements together, good content, storytelling, and humor. You've got an audience that I find reacts well to my messaging as Irishman Speaks.
Fantastic. Can you give us an example or maybe a part of your presentation? Let's start with goals. If you were to talk about goals, how do you intertwine humor with a talk about goals? Maybe a part of your presentation?
Right, I can do that. The first thing I do in the presentation is I talk about having clear goals and vision. And you know from your work on strategy, you can do days and days and days of work and workshopping about vision and strategy, etc. But I think when I'm speaking to a group and I've only got maybe 55 minutes or 60 minutes, now I do some consulting work as well, that takes longer. But if I'm speaking to a group, what I say at the start is we're going to talk about goals. And the first goal is a macro goal. And the macro goal is, what do you want to be famous for? What do you want to be famous for? And by that, I mean, what is it that you want your colleagues to say about you when you're not in the room? What is it that if the local newspaper or television station does a little profile on you, what is the kind of messaging that they reference you in? So I ask people to say, give them maybe 30 seconds a minute to think about it. All right, what is it you want your colleagues to say when you're not in the room? What is it you want your customers to say when they hear you're coming in to do another sales presentation? So if you know what it is you want people to say about you, you've then got a chance to start building the brand. And so that's a macro goal. I'll come to just show how we bring humor into now in a couple of seconds. The micro goal then is I provide 5 micro goals that spell the acronym CHAPS, CHAPS. Okay, so the first micro goal is compliment. And the basic idea here, I say, Zarina, is that you've decided you know what you want people to say about you. That's what the macro goal is. And I say to you, one of the simple ways to achieve that is to set yourself a micro goal that you will compliment one person at work each day, or you will compliment one member of your family or one member of your community. When you compliment those people, what will happen is that you will realize, hey, I've achieved a micro goal. So the dopamine kicks in, the neurotransmitters kick in, and they make you feel better. But the person that you've complimented is obviously going to feel way better, and it's a win-win situation. Now, I then say, all right, sometimes people say it's difficult to compliment people. And I make the comment, well, you can always find some way to compliment people. You can say something like, wow, your hair doesn't look as bad today as it did yesterday. Okay? Yeah.
I like that one.
Right. Or you can also kind of express admiration for them. You might say something like, wow, I really admire the way you don't care about your appearance. Okay? So again, they're kind of goofball compliments, and I say, all right, you can't really use those. But when I bring those in, what's going to happen? Like you, the audience smiles, you get more connected with the audience, the dopamine, the serotonin kick in, etc., and there's a better connection with the speaker. What also happens is that they're no longer kind of saying, all right, say something that's going to get me interested. That kind of thing, the good content, the little bit of humor with it is what gets people interested. And that's where I then build on the other elements of the micro goals that actually do spell out the CHAPS acronyms, CHAPS. And I put in some other humorous little bits and pieces into those elements as well.
Mm-hmm. What do you say to people that would say, what if they think I'm a clown, if I make such jokes? They're like, I'm a serious business person. I'm not going to go around and make jokes like that. Have you ever had such a comment?
No, I have. Well, sorry, I've had that query, yes, and I haven't had that.
Up to you, yeah, but
yeah.
the question.
But what I say to people is that there is a difference between adding humor and being a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the comedian can try and get jokes people laughing every 15, 25 or 35 seconds or whatever it is, but there's no serious messaging there.
Right.
What I say is that if you're doing a sales call, for instance, and you know the phrase, people do business with people that they like.
Mm-hmm.
All right. One of the ways that we can build likability is by putting a smile on someone's face. And when I put a smile on your face, I'm going to smile back, and it becomes a self-reinforcing thing. One of the ways you can build better connection with people is by just getting a few of these neurotransmitters going that you've generated for them, and you're going to have people appreciate you better. So what I say is that if you're in a sales presentation, you don't have to do a dry, boring sales presentation. And if you do a dry, boring sales presentation, you're not going to get the business. But I do believe that, let's say that in the last, we're talking to a group of salespeople, I will say to them, in the last week, has anything happened in a sales call that you have made that put a smile on your face? And people kind of go, yeah, I suppose so, yeah, all right. Has anything been said to you that put a smile on your face? Yeah, all right. So what I say is that, okay, you don't have to be funny to be funny. And this is one of the key elements of the adding humor to your presentation. You don't have to be funny to be funny. Just capture the humor around you. And if you were in a sales call last week where you said something or showed something to a client that put a smile on their face, just say to yourself, all right, can I use that in the next call? Would it be appropriate to use that when I'm speaking to Joseph or Josephine tomorrow? And over a period of time, if you capture the humor that you see around you, that you read maybe in business books, because you can get some humor stories there, or a cartoon you saw that related to your particular business message, why not drop it in and to reinforce your messaging, or to break the monotony of your sales call? Put a smile on their face. We're not expecting it to be falling around and the sides laughing, but when you do that, you're making a better connection. And that only works if you've got a professional presenter doing professional content about a good product.
Mm-hmm. Your course that you're offering, what is it called again? I can't see it in your background.
Adding humor to your
presentation. Let's talk a little bit about this. We are hopping a bit in terms of subjects. I'm not quite sure if we're going to go back to the CHAPS acronym.
Yeah.
But let's focus a little bit on the presentation. If you're not everybody is natural at making jokes, at catching humorous things, and maybe they're offended often. How do you go about this where people cannot naturally catch the humorous part in something? How do you teach them humor?
Right. Well, I'll ask you a question. No, and this is the way I preface the program, and it's one of the key elements of my adding humor to your presentation course. So if I'm looking for a 5-letter word now, Zarina, 5 letters in the word, okay? And so I'm going to ask you a question. If I say something that I think is funny, what do I expect you to do?
To laugh.
Laugh. How many letters are in laugh? L-A-F-F. No, sorry. L-A-U-G-H. Okay? Laugh. All right. So what I do is, one of the elements of the adding humor to your presentation course is I provide an acronym that spells laugh, that if you adopt and adapt, will help you to add humor to your presentation. And it basically is all about capturing the humor, not creating it. So if we're just to go quickly through the laugh elements, the first element of laugh is L, and L is for listen. Okay. And by listen, I mean, it kind of goes back to what I said a few minutes ago. If you're a salesperson and something happened at one of your meetings last week that made you smile or made the client smile or someone else in the room smile, listen to that, pay attention to it, write it down, or put it into your iPhone. Okay, which is what I do. I've got a lot of notes here in the iPhone. That's the first element. So I don't know when I'm going to be able to use that, but what I'm doing is I'm capturing the humor. Now, and what I actually say to people is that research suggests that adults laugh about 15 to 20 times a day. The average person laughs 15 to 20 times a day. Now, I know that you're above average, Zarina, so you'll be laughing more than 15 or 20 times.
That's
okay?
because I have a child. It depends who we communicate with.
That I'll give you a wonderful example of that now in a second, as to that is a source of humor. Okay, so the second element of the laugh acronym is anecdote, telling stories. All right, and if you recall over the last couple of weeks, or pay attention to going forward, the things that will put a smile on your face are not normally, most of the time, are not jokes. It's anecdotes or stories about your child. So what age is your child?
7.
7, okay, all right. So I mean, they've got words of wisdom coming out every single day. All right. So I bet any money that you've told stories about your child to your friends to put a smile on their face. Now, I'll come back to that now in a second. So we got anecdote. L, listen. L, A, anecdote. U is uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. And the basic idea here is that the funniest stories are often the ones where something was uncomfortable at the time, or something went wrong, but now you're telling it to your friends at the Starbucks or at the local pub or somewhere else like that, and you're able to laugh at it. At the time, it was kind of annoying or frustrating, or maybe something might have gone wrong in some way or other, but now you can laugh at it. I'll give you an example. And it ties very much to what to your child and the age as well. I speak a lot to manufacturing conferences and safety conferences also. And one of the core tenets I say is that you need to come into work with 10 fingers and toes and leave with 10 fingers and toes. That's a basic concept, just a safety little kind of cliche. But to do this, you, Zarina, as now you're the manufacturing audience, you've got to be aware of your surroundings constantly. A couple of days ago, I went to collect my darling granddaughter, Maggie, from soccer practice. She's 6 years of age, nearly the same age as your child. We put Maggie into the car seat in the back of the car. My wife sits into the car seat in the back of the car. And then, being a crazy grampy, I sit into the back seat as well. And after a couple of seconds, Maggie realizes, Grampy, you should be driving the car. And I say, I want to stay here. And she says, Grampy, as only a 6-year-old granddaughter would do. So I get to go out of the car, except I can't. We're on child's lock. We're stuck in the back seat of the car, okay?
But where was your wife, though?
Sorry, what did you say?
Where was your wife? She was with you, right?
My wife was in the back seat of the car as well.
Oh, as well.
Okay?
Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah. So she got in first. She always sits in the back seat with Maggie, and I decided to go into the back seat.
Yeah.
So the problem then was that we're wondering, what are we going to do? I've got to phone my daughter, who had already left the parking lot. She comes back 5 minutes later and opens the car door for us. Now, that is just a small, minor little humorous anecdote about relationships with your kids or with your grandkids, where something went slightly wrong. And even then we were laughing at it, but a lot of the time you won't necessarily be laughing when something does go wrong. But here's the point I make, Zarina. I say to people in the audience, okay, you're in a manufacturing audience. Many of you got 4-year-old kids, 5-year-old kids, 6-year-old kids. when you're putting your kid into that car seat this evening or tomorrow morning, ask yourself, what are the child locks that I've got to pay attention to in my workplace? If you don't have kids, but you come to the traffic lights tomorrow morning, it's quite likely you'll see mom or dad driving the car and there's a kid in the back seat strapped in. Say to yourself, all right, what do I have to pay attention to today that if I don't pay attention to, we might end up in trouble? So that's a simple little example of just capturing the humor that happened to me and my daughter and my wife. I adapted it a little bit to the presentation, but it is really relevant. And what makes it even more relevant, Zarina, is I'll say to the audience, all right, just by a show of hands, how many of you have got kids at the moment? So let's say 15% of the audience. All right, remember when you're strapping the kid in about what the child lock process is. How many of you are grandparents? Remember when you see a kid in a backseat of a car to pay attention to, or think about, what do I have to pay attention to at work that maybe I don't always pay attention to make sure that we are able to come into work with 10 fingers and toes and leave with 10 fingers and toes.
So this means the story of the anecdote has to be a personal anecdote, or can it be from somebody else? Or it has it?
I think it can be. I think it can be. When I put it this way, is that it has to be relevant. So I think it's quite likely that, let's say you're reading a biography, I don't know, maybe of, let's say Abraham Lincoln or Emperor Franz Joseph, for instance, something like that. If there's some story in that puts a smile on your face, what I do is I'll just maybe take a photo shot of it and put it into my computer or into my notes. I don't know if I'm ever going to use it. All I'm saying is that it's a story that should be relevant, that should reinforce in some way your core business message. And if it is there's some humor related to it, I think that it makes it even better. But I mean, storytelling as a professional speaker is a critical skill to get your message across. Storytelling with humor enhances that possibility of getting the message across.
And when you start with the LAUGH acronym, is this only an opening strategy for the speeches and for the strategy you convey to your clients? Is it just the opening?
It's one of the core elements of the program. So we got listen, anecdote, uncomfortable. G is actually for Google, okay? Or as I say, Google and the Bing, all right? And the basic idea here is that if you're doing a presentation, doing a keynote speech or something like that, and you're looking to add just a little bit of humor, let's say you're doing something on leadership. All you got to do, I feel, is that get onto the Googler, and as Google and the Bing, as I like to say, and do things like humorous quotes about leadership, funny quotes about management, silly quotes about leadership, funny newspaper headlines about leadership. What did Groucho Marx say about leaders or managers or presidents, that kind of thing. And what you can do is you can take one or two of those quotes that you've got on Google, drop them in, give credit for where it came from. But if you drop it in as part of your messaging just to reinforce the message, I think you will, one, reinforce the message. It'll put a smile in the audience's face. You're building that connection again, and you're continuing to reinforce what you're trying to get across. The other one that I always say is that the best reaction I get, because I ask people to do this on their phones when I'm doing some keynotes on adding humor to your presentation. I ask people to get onto their phones and Google funny newspaper headlines. Funny newspaper headlines. Now, we don't need to go into it here, but I would encourage anyone who's watching this to pick up their phone or wherever they are to be able to check the internet and Google funny newspaper headlines. And it is astonishing what is actually being printed. And you may well be able to use one of those to reinforce your message as well. And again, have you created the humor? No, you're capturing the humor. So we got listen, anecdote, uncomfortable, Google. And then H is about going from he to ho, ho, ho. Going from he to ho, ho, ho. And the logic here, Zarina, is that let's say you're doing a presentation and you make a comment and it gets kind of a giggle from the audience, a little he. And what I do, and what I encourage people to do, is to pay attention to that. Go back to the first element of laugh, which is listen. So listen and you say, all right, I got a he there. What can I do when I'm presenting this the next time to use that line or phrase to give it a ho, ho, ho? So it might well just mean not forecasting as much as what you're going to say. I mean, a simple little thing I say to people is never say at a presentation, I want to tell you a funny story. Just tell the story. Hopefully it is funny, you'll get a reaction. But if you say, I want to tell a funny story, well, one of the good things about humor is surprise. So now I'm telling them something is going to be funny. That takes away a little bit of the surprise. It may or may not be funny, but I do think that if you just tell the story, at the very least, you're going to get a little bit of a smile or a he. And when you get that he, ask yourself, all right, can I do something with that line or that story that I can build to make it a ho, ho, ho the next time I'm doing it? So that laugh acronym is one element of the overall course that I'm doing on adding humor to your presentation. Basically, I also talk about how you can craft a humorous story and build it from almost nothing to be able to build a humorous story that may be appropriate for business presentations or for some other thing you're doing. I talk about the importance of being able to get across make sure that you don't use inappropriate humor. And we all know how easy it is to offend people today. And the basic way I address the question about being offensive, if you think it's going to offend people, it's going to offend someone. Now, if you're a comedian, I don't think any comedian can exist without offending someone. That's a bit too general, but the vast majority of comedians will upset someone sometime, someplace, and they have to live with it, and they do live with it. But if you're a business presenter, you can't afford to upset your audience and offend them. So I'm very careful that any of the material that I use is done in a professional way, is unlikely to cause any offense, and that it just, again, reinforces the message that I want to get across.
Adding humor, is it appropriate for any type of presentation, any subject, any industry, or is it specifically for sales presentations, for some pitches? If I'm doing a budgeting presentation, is it appropriate to use these tools?
Well, if you believe in the power of humor, Zarina, that humor actually gets the neurotransmitters going, makes the person who's receiving the humor feel better, likely to make you more likable, etc. Definitely when you're doing budget presentations, you do want to be liked. It's tough when you're doing budget presentations to be liked. But I mean, a simple little thing there might be, you could just find a cartoon online about budgeting. I would bet any money that if you did a Google search for funny headlines about budgets or about finance or about accounting, you will find some headlines there. And you could say, all right, so let's say you're presenting a tough budget to your management team. Gang, we've got a real problem here today. We've got to come up with some solutions and maybe cut costs by 3 or 4%. But I saw a cartoon the other day that represented kind of the situation that we're in. And you could pop that cartoon up there. So I would never say that humor is appropriate in all circumstances. But when you think about it, when you go to a funeral, people laugh a lot at funerals because they're telling stories about the deceased or the interaction they had with them at some stage. So if you're doing a eulogy at a funeral, I do not think it is at all inappropriate to tell some anecdotes about the person that has passed away, that puts a smile on the attendant's face and makes them remember, that he or she was a lovely person and they made me feel good when they were around as well. So It's not appropriate in all circumstances, but I would say the vast majority of interactions that we have got where we're in front of people, humor will help to grease the axle and make the conversation and connection better.
Mm-hmm. One last question about the structure of the presentation. You advised opening up with a humorous story, but how often throughout the presentation do you advise these humorous elements to be included?
Well, I think it totally depends on the circumstances. I don't necessarily advise that you open with humor. It depends on the audience. For instance, when I speak to manufacturing or business groups, I will use, hopefully within that presentation, because of the type of style I've got, and I will have people laughing quite well 5 or 6 or 7 times during a 35 or 45-minute presentation. If I'm speaking to, as you mentioned, I've had 2 bouts of cancer over the years, and I speak a lot to oncology nurses, which is my favorite group of all to speak to. They're just the funnest audience. They have a really stress-filled job, and they do really like to let go and laugh. So when I'm speaking to them, or when I'm speaking to cancer survivors, I will throw more humorous material in. Less content, but more humor. And for instance, one of the ways I often, when I'm pitching for a piece of business with an oncology audience or a nurse navigator who might be choosing a keynote speaker for the oncology conference, I'll tell the man or woman that I've had 2 bouts of cancer, I've had prostate, and I've had thyroid, and they've whipped both of them out. So I now tell people, Zarina, that having had a thyroidectomy and a prostatectomy, I now have an Irish condition known as there's not much left of me. Okay? So that's the kind of way like I can take what is a serious topic and some health issues that I had, put a bit of humor into it that they can relate to as well. So it really does depend on the audience. The bottom line is humor does improve the connection with your audience. You've got to ask yourself, what is that level of humor that I got to bring to continue to improve the connection and that I don't go overboard? Because if you come across as being just a funny person with no good content, well, maybe you might entertain the audience, but you're probably not going to entertain the client you're trying to pitch to. Doesn't want to be entertained. They want to have their problems solved. And hopefully what you can do is show you can solve their problems by presenting your content, some stories, showing how good your content or your product is. And maybe some of those stories will have a little bit of humor in them where they'll be able to reinforce the overall message.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Conor. Is this a picture of Chicago behind you?
I actually tell people I live in Illinois. Chicago's in Illinois. Zarina, Chicago, Illinois is one of the most bankrupt states in the United States. So I tell people this is the back road from the area I live into Chicago because they can't afford to do the roads any better. So no, it's actually from my homeland in Ireland.
Mm. I enjoyed it so much, Conor. It was a real pleasure. I learned a lot. It actually threw me back in time quite some years ago when for the first time I experienced what you're talking about, a presentation with humor included. And it was the CEO of a very large corporation presented the results and the business plan for 5 years ahead. And it was the first time when I saw cartoons of tortoises beating each other and rabbits on slides that are presenting budgets. And this was quite extraordinary for me. So I still remember it 20 years onwards. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you must have only been 6 years of age when you were at that presentation.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much. You made me laugh as you promised. So
thank you. It's been a pleasure. All right. And I love I know your adopted city of Vienna. I was in Prague a couple of weeks ago. I love that. We were debating going over to Vienna, but I was in Vienna years ago when I worked with the Conor brand, K-N-O-R-R. We had a lot of big facilities in Austria, and Vienna is a beautiful city, so I hope you're having a good time there with your 7-year-old child.
I am. Where can people get a hold of you to maybe sign up for your course?
Right. The course is my website is Irishman Speaks. If they want to get details of the course, I have a website called The Improvement Academy, theimprovementacademy.com.
Yeah.
And I have some of my courses up there. So Irishman Speaks, the website details are there also, but the best one is theimprovementacademy.com.
Mm-hmm. And also something that we didn't mention is that you're also an author, and one of your books is called Suppose You Were an Idiot, Mark Twain on Politics and Politicians.
Indeed, yeah. And the logic behind that was, again, this is an example of you don't need to create the humor. Mark Twain has a lot of very humorous lines. But Twain once said, suppose you were an idiot, suppose you were a congressman, but I repeat myself. Okay? And of course, that of course is not at all relevant to anything that's happening here in the United States today. Thankfully.
I love it.
What are you laughing at? I'm shocked and stunned that you would think it was appropriate for today.
It's a fantastic ending to this talk. I enjoyed it so much, Conor. Thank you.
Take care. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Grow and Learn. We hope that you found our podcast informative, engaging, and inspiring. Our mission is to help you keep growing and learning, and we hope that our conversations and insights have provided you with practical advice and useful perspectives. If you're looking for personalized support and guidance to help you achieve your personal or professional growth objectives, I offer a range of services to help. As a trusted management partner and mentor, I work with businesses in the process of transformation, looking for new streams of business, as well as M&A. With an extensive professional network of experts and mentors, I can bring on board the right person or team based on the specific needs of the company I'm working with. To learn more about the services I offer and how I can help you achieve your goals, visit my website at grownlearn.org. You can also reach out to me via email or social media. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this episode of Grow and Learn, please subscribe to our podcast and leave us a review. Your feedback is important to us, and it helps us to continue to create content that is relevant and valuable to our listeners. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to sharing more insights and perspectives with you in the future.